I'm a senior here, and I did my project on aviation. Why aviation? I've loved aviation since I was a toddler. To put that in perspective for you, my first experience with airplanes was when I was a toddler. I went to the Aviation Museum at Richmond International Airport when I was still in diapers, and I was so enthralled by the experience that I neglected to tell my father I needed to use the restroom. You can imagine where that went. But from beyond that, it's only expanded and just burgeoned into this huge love of aviation. I've always considered a career in aviation, but I wanted to find out some things about it. Now, when we talk about aviation, we need to consider what aviation is. There's three types. There's rotorcraft, which is anything with a large spinning blade. Your helicopters, your gyrocopters, really the loud looking ones. The lighter than air ships, which is anything blimps, dirigibles, Zeppelin, your Hindenburg, and of course your hot air balloons. And then there's fixed wing, which is the most popular type. It's my favorite type, and it's the part I focused on for my project. And fixed wing is anything with a large singular wing that doesn't fly around. It uses usually a propeller or a jet to fly itself. It also includes gliders. Now, in aviation, before I jump into a career and decide to take my life path to aviation, I wanted to see both sides of it. So I know a fair amount about the cockpit side, but I wanted to see what it's like outside the cockpit with all the logistics and all the ground movements. So I took a look at a large-scale airport and a small-scale airport, and I saw what goes on behind the scenes on the ground after and before a plane lands. To start that, I actually looked into research. I looked into, before even becoming a pilot, the costs and regulations and how hard it is and how many people are put off by costs and regulations. And I found that with regulations, even though they continually and inevitably rise and become more and more complicated, that actually isn't an issue that stops people. What stops people is the cost, and specifically in the cost, which remains about the same. It's between $8,000 to $15,000 to get your private pilot's license, and the average is $10,000. That has remained constant since around the 1960s. The problem is, while the economy waxes and wanes, that affects the amount of people who can actually afford to become pilots. So in more recent years, to show an example of this, in 2008, with the recession, it was the first time in 2009, the next year after they counted the number of pilots, it was the first time in nearly 40 years since the 1970s that there were less than 300,000 pilots in America. Now, to put that in perspective, to begin with, there's only 1% of the population as pilots. Now, when the economy drains, the number of pilots reduces to even less than that. So you can see how finicky and how difficult it is to become a pilot and how much cost really affects that. And then for my community service, I worked with a man named Jared Powers, who is the manager at Louisa County Freeman Field, just down the road here. Jared is, he's been manager of Louisa County for 5 years now, and before that he was manager of Shenandoah National Airport in the mountains. He's been the youngest airport manager in the state of Virginia for almost 6 years now. And he really, apart from the community service, apart from the mentor aspect of it, he really gave me a lot of good tips on becoming involved in the aviation industry. So separate from this project, I learned a whole lot for myself, which I thought was really nice. But Jared, I went to him and he graciously accepted my help with the Louisa County Air Show. There, I spent 2 long and pretty fun days there. The first day was a lot of setup for the 2014 air show, a lot of putting up snow fence to keep spectators from running into airplanes and vice versa, a lot of trash can making, setting around, keep people from stepping in trash and throwing trash all over the place, and a lot of some roping off of areas to keep people safe and to keep airplanes safe. The next day actually was when the action happened. I got there at 8 o'clock. I started parking cars that morning in an area we had roped off earlier that day, and then some Civil Air Patrol kids came in and took control of that for me, so I didn't have to do that too much. Then I got to go with more airplanes. And the second half of the day, I actually got to do, which what you can see here is when the planes come in, there's a taxiway. There's only one taxiway at Louisa County Freeman Field, and there's 3 exits to this taxiway. And the one was blocked off because it was for parking, so no one can go on that one. And the other one was at this area called the hot box. And the hot box is where the planes, the performers, would spool up their engines and get ready to perform. So no spectators were allowed there. So there's only one area into the tarmac, and the tarmac was actually the spectator area as well. So most, I'd say about 50 to 60% of the spectators for the air show were actually pilots themselves who flew in from various regions around the county, like Anna, Orange, down south, and they would fly in on the runway and they'd land. And when they came on the taxiway, FAA guidelines or Federal Aviation Administration guidelines say that you cannot have a moving engine in a secondary area. So when they would come up to this, they'd have to roll up, cut their engine off, and then we'd push them to a parking spot, and they would actually become a static display for the air show, which was really a unique experience because it gave the air show a dynamic feel that you can never really predict. But as the air show came around 3 o'clock when the air space was supposed to close, more and more airplanes started coming in more frequently. So what was 12 of us men pushing and parking airplanes became me and another gentleman. And as my helper there, a man named Jeremy, walked away with another aircraft, I could see another one coming, and he looked me in the eyes and he goes, "Mason, been watching what I'm doing?" "Yeah." And he said, "You got it." And then he walked away. So I got to do what here is called marshalling an aircraft, which is on this taxiway, I'd see a plane coming that just landed, I'd walk out and I'd get his attention. And then when I saw that I had his attention, I'd guide him in. And then as he came towards this, I'd give him a left turn, bring him in up until he got just out of frame here. He'd stop, I'd give him the stop command, cut his engine, he'd get out, we'd meet, greet him, and then push or use a tractor to pull his airplane to the spot, which was really exciting for me that they gave a 17-year-old that kind of responsibility, but I wasn't going to complain. My legacy with that, I really hoped and I feel that I did reach children and even adults with this installation of hope and love of aviation that I got at such a young age. And it was really kind of a unique experience to see like people from 3 to 85 smile that comes on their face when aircraft are flying by and when they turn their engines on and when they're doing loops and flybys and everything they do for the air show. And I really feel that will inspire them to love aviation, and then later on down the road, they may want to have the same feeling and inspire more children to grow the aviation from maybe 1% of population to 10 or 20. For my internship, I worked with a man named Joe Sherrick, who at the time of my internship had only been at Richmond International Airport's air traffic control tower with the FAA for only 4 months. So he was fairly new to that place, but Joe is a longtime veteran. He's 14 years in the FAA. Before coming to Richmond, he was actually a air traffic control manager at Pittsburgh International Airport, which has a regular tower and then as well as a TRACON, which is another level of inside air traffic control. So he managed 2 at once. So he was well versed in the administration and flight operations. I didn't work with him specifically very often because he was actually, since he was the manager, he was a lot of administrative work. But he did hook me up with people in the tower and a few of the ground operation people to let me see the ins and outs of air traffic control. I spent 1 full day with tech ops with a man named John Sharp, who showed me all the technology inside the tower itself, which is a lot of radio transmitters and a lot of very fine equipment, and then as well as on the airport itself, the radar beacons, the landing strip lights, all those things. And I really got to, actually one of the things I got to do was help install a radio transmitter inside of the tower, which was a unique experience because again, I was 17 and they don't really let 17-year-olds do a lot at federal buildings. But I actually got to help put in this radio transmitter, which allows pilots to talk to air traffic control and vice versa, keeps them from flying into themselves in the ground. Another experience, I spent a day with a man named Joseph Sheridan, who was the ground ops manager. So he makes sure everything on the ground is safe and operational. That includes anything from ramp workers to fuel trucks to planes themselves to construction to maintenance. Everything that's on the ground, he's in charge of. And he allowed me to go out with him on the runway to do one of the many daily runway checks he did. So I had the unique experience of standing on an active runway, checking it for cracks and things as I watched 3 to 4 aircraft on final approach about to land where I was standing. So that was a little hair turning. But most of the time I spent in the tower, up in the tower tab, which is up here. You can't really see it, but there's a lot of glass there, and it's a big circular room with a lot of equipment, a lot of computer technology, a lot of radio equipment, radar screens. And up there, I was definitely not allowed to touch anything, but I was allowed with this headset here to the left. I was able to put it on, clip to my belt, and then plug it in. And this thing had one of those old coil, like landline phone coils, so you can walk around the whole thing with it. But I listen into air and ground traffic. So ground traffic is anything that's on the tarmac, going on runways, parking. I can hear that, and as well as local traffic, which is the smaller aircraft, the prop planes, things just flying around for fun, as well as commercial jets. And at times, it got to be a little much because I was vastly unfamiliar with all the radio chatter. And if you're listening to both at once, you can hear you can hear ground traffic talking at the same time as air traffic. So you can imagine why there needs to be more than one person up there at one time controlling all this. I was actually surprised by my time up there. I found that there was only 2 to 3 people in the tower, excluding myself, at once, which is different from what I expected if you'd seen in movies or on the news. Usually an air traffic control tower is this hive of activity and computer working and tapping and telling planes to go this and that and this and that. And really it was really calm, and they were really collected. And even the one time there was a slight emergency, a plane had pulled into someplace it was not allowed to go, and it was blocking an active runway, and we had 5 aircraft coming in on final approach. That is, they were about to land. And the woman, Lisa, who was doing air traffic at that time, diverted 5 planes at once, and it was really kind of cool because she would say divert 120 to Potomac, and I'd watch a large piece of metal just turn in the sky and go away. And even after that, they were calm, and then they just filled out an incident report, and then they just went on with their day. So it was nothing like what you'd see in like Die Hard or any of these crazy movies. Personally, this really concreted my want to be involved in aviation. I don't know specifically what I want to do. I know I want to fly, but it's going to be something involved with aviation. This has eliminated any other choice that I'd ever considered. Planes are the way to go for me. As well, it gave me a glimpse into the world of bureaucratic hierarchy, I'd say, because at Freeman Field, it's really lax, and there's no dress code. As you can see from the picture, I was in jeans and a t-shirt, but every day that I went to tower, I was in my slacks and a dress shirt, and it was weird to see how structured it was there, and to communicate with people, you wouldn't just say it to their face. You would say it to their face, but you'd also send an email to get confirmation. And that was different than anything I've expected, even though I've been in the workplace before. It was a different workplace setting for me. Where to go further with this? Definitely want to be involved in aviation. I'm going to Virginia Tech in the fall to study aerospace engineering. So if for some reason I can't fly them, I can at least build them. And from that, I hope to fly them either in the military or in the private sector. I'd love to give a special thanks to Tamara Dorr, who ran the front desk at Richmond International Airport. She saved me from a long line of phone calls that with the FAA, long phone tree. She saved me there. She hooked me up with Joe Sherrick, and she actually did a lot of the work for getting me with tech ops and ground ops, and she was a really big help and a saver for me in this project. I don't believe I would have been able to do anything without her. I'd like to thank the RIC, the Richmond International Airport Air Traffic Control staff, which is everybody in the tower, everyone in tech ops and ground ops. They really just took me under their wing. They took time out of their day to explain to me how their job is and how it affected them and whether I should do it or not, which was really, really kind of them because they didn't have to, and I didn't ask them personally to do that. They did it on their own. And I'd like to thank Freeman Field staff who helped me help them get this air show to be a resounding success. Are there any questions?
Do you have a specific area of aviation you like more than another?
I really like general aviation, which is anything, which is like planes like this.